Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Griffin Report podcast. I'm your host, Griffin Della Penna, and we have a new guest here. First coach that we've had so far this series, as he is the sixth head coach in Canisius College women's soccer history after officially being named head coach on April 30th, 2021. He has also spearheaded the women's soccer team to a 2-2-3 start in non-conference play. That is none other than Mr. Ryan Louie. Coach, thanks for coming on to the pod today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great to now showcase some of the coaches off and be able to, expand to a larger audience their programs and everything that Canisius has to offer. So we'll get right into it, starting with now this is going to come out after the Rider game, but how was this week of practice leading up to your first conference game against Rider?
We've had a fantastic week. Obviously, the Cleveland game was a big win for us, and something we've sort of spoke about this week is just to continue down that path, take game by game and really focus on what's in front of us. And, the energy's good right now, morale's good, girls are enjoying what they're doing, and I think we're in a real good place.
So then in terms of the improvement, and again, we'll dive deeper into this, but from last season to this season, you're seeing it. It's very evident, even from an outside perspective, of how this program has really developed and grown. What is the one area where you as a head coach are extremely proud of your players in the growth from last season to this year?
Yeah, I think I have to go back a little bit here because I think it actually started in January for us. The 16 returners, we sort of all got together, looked in the mirror a little bit, really reflected on what can only be described as somewhat of a disappointing season. And we all just decided to go to work. And like I said, it started January, early mornings, lots of lifts, lots of practice, lots of tough times, but I think that's why we are where we are today. Obviously, we have brought in a lot of talented freshmen to mix it within that group, but it'd be wrong of me not to mention the current 16 girls that were here last season that really did sort of have a look in the mirror and say, listen, it wasn't good enough. We want to be better. We want to buy in. We want to work hard, and I believe that's why we are where we are today.
Yeah, and I think it really goes to show that last year, like a stable foundation was built, and now you're going to see the consistent growth. But for the viewers at home, you can already tell they're picking up on your accent already, and I personally love listening to it myself. But so you're originally from Southport, England.
Yes.
When did you first get introduced to the game, and when did soccer start becoming such a big part of your life?
So you might not know this, I'm from England, but I actually lived in Spain as a kid for 10 years.
Really?
So when I was 2, my family moved to Spain. Timeshare was a big thing. Basically, they bought various properties, leased them out to other tourists who were looking to sort of spend their holidays in Spain. So I ended up going to a Spanish school, couldn't speak the language, obviously from a different country. Wow. And that's sort of how my connection with soccer started, because even though we couldn't communicate vocally, the game of soccer is such a multilingual sport that it allowed for us to connect in that manner. So that's where my soccer journey began in Spain. I then moved back to England when I was 12, basically to get an English education. My first language was Spanish. My parents were sort of looking around going, both myself and my sister couldn't really read and write in English, so they were like, it's probably a good time now to move back home and get them acclimated into the English language, right. Which we did. And then, I've just had a passion and a love for the sport since the age of 4. But my journey started in Spain. I have an English accent. I'm obviously originally from England, lived there, but Spain was where it began. And then, English and their soccer, it's a different culture. Right. It's very different. People ask me all the time, what's the difference between how soccer is here compared to back home? And the way I explain it is, well, how do Americans support the Bills? Right. It's, you wake up on Monday excited for that game at the weekend, and it's all you think about all week. So really is just a passion and a culture, and you're sort of forced to be ingrained into it. Yeah. So from a very young age.
Yeah, that's crazy. I had no idea about that. And we've gotten to know each other a little bit over the years, but that is crazy. And going off your point about how soccer is just ingrained in the English culture. I'm a huge Ted Lasso guy. That's one of my favorite shows. It kind of started to spread like wildfire last year. But going off that point, like they describe it in the show, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but how that team, like it's these small cities that are so ingrained with their football club that is everything. Like you take pride when your team is doing well, and then you're riding the lows as well when they're not doing well. Was that similar for you after you came back from Spain for that dynamic as well?
It was. Even when I was in Spain, my soccer team was always Liverpool. My dad was a diehard Liverpool fan, so I was 6'7", running around Spain wearing Liverpool kits and tried to put my Spanish one on now and again, and my father wouldn't allow it. But yeah, it's funny you mentioned Ted Lasso, because I'm a big fan as well, and it really is like that. You know, maybe not quite to the extent of some of the characters, but it's life. You know, people live and breathe soccer there, and it's just, it's a big part of what people do.
Yeah. Danny Rojas, he says, football is life.
Football is life.
It is.
Exactly.
But, so, again, you add to the equation now you going to Spain and then England, and then you end up here in the States. Was that always a transition that you knew you wanted to do after you graduated from university? Or tell me about that experience for you of when you got your coaching degree, then to come here to the U.S.
I think I've always enjoyed traveling, obviously from my early years. Played at a decent level back home, was never really going to make it professionally. It's very difficult. Yeah. And then from the coaching side of things, it's probably even more challenging. So if you've not played professionally or at a high level, it's difficult to make a career out of coaching in England. Gotcha. Something I had a passion from a very young age. So I actually started coming to the States when I was 17, just doing various summer camps, you know, sort of traveling America really. I used it as a tool to see America, and it was like a mini vacation, and I got to meet people, but I was always involved in doing something I really enjoyed. It was after I finished my degree in England, when I started looking in the mirror and trying to figure out what I was going to do for a career, that after looking back at my time here, I realized there was an avenue here where you could really make a living and a career for yourself. So did a little bit of research, joined up with a company, saw I was going to New York. Obviously a little bit naive. I thought I was going to New York City. Yeah. Really excited. A couple of weeks before coming to Buffalo, I jumped on Google and I was like, where's this Buffalo? I thought it was like a little suburb outside the city. Realized I was going to Canada, or as close to Canada as you could. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. I've committed to it now. Came and never left since. I've been here, obviously got my wife, family now, 2 little boys, and Buffalo is home.
Yeah, that's really cool. And you first started in the youth game and, you know, kind of indulging yourself into that aspect of coaching. Now you've seen your progression upwards, not just at Buff State and now here at Canisius. But tell me what that was like for you to then come here, and obviously you have that soccer background, but it had to be almost a culture shock of sorts when you first got here, and now you're coaching in the youth game. Was that true?
A little bit. I think, you know, when I first came here, I was coaching 2, 3, 4-year-olds. It was, you know, babysitting. Yeah. The mums and dads were there. They were running on the field with you. So I probably coached every gender, every ethnicity, every level you can think of. So I look back at my journey now, and I just look at the ladders that I've climbed to get here, and it's something I'm proud of. But some of those memories were fantastic. You know, some of the connections you build and the lives you change, and you know, it's real cool to see. But to go back to your question a little bit, I always had an ambition to coach at a higher level, but I wasn't afraid to start at the bottom and work my way up to where I am now. And you know, from coaching 2, 3, 4-year-olds to coaching beginners to coaching high school kids to coaching top club kids to now coaching college soccer was sort of the path I envisioned quite early on.
And was that a case for you when you're now coaching some of like the top high school talent around here, and you're ingraining yourself with that? Did that almost open doors for you to then transition into Buff State? Or how does that dynamic from a coach that, like you said before, you're spending all this time with the youth kids to then maybe make some calls of people that you know to then get into the college game?
Yeah, I think I started to build a bit of a reputation in the youth game, especially locally, developing players, moving players onto college, and then you start to network with college coaches. I'll be honest though, the way I ended up at Buff State was quite random. I ended up emailing probably 20, 30 coaches. No one got back to me. And I had a good role within the club I was working with, but I wanted another challenge. So emailed 20, 30 coaches, no one got back to me. And then the head coach, Mark Howlett, at the time at Buffalo State, was the only one to reach back out to me and say, yeah, come in, I'll give you a little interview and sort of see where you are. And I went and met him and his coaching staff, and they were brilliant. And they welcomed me with open arms. I was a volunteer at the time, so thankfully with my employers, they were allowing me to go in and do some stuff with them and really learn from Mark and his staff. And that's sort of how my college journey began.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it was an interesting dynamic for you. So when you first got there, you were an assistant in trending not just the men's program, but also the women's program too. So you're bouncing back between both of those. And then in 2017, you know, U.S. Coach East Regional Staff of the Year, you helped the Bengals get to their first trip in 34 years to the NCAA tournament. How were those years so formative for you to now transition to where you are here at Canisius?
Yeah, so that was obviously with the men's program with Mark. Like I said, his staff were fantastic, and I'm very honoured to be a part of that list. Yeah. Even though I was a volunteer at the time, but they were so welcoming. They allowed me to actually coach and do things and be a part of it, and help individuals develop. So, like I said, very grateful to be on that list. I'm not sure how much I actually did, but I asked Mark all the time, and he was obviously grateful for my work there. But the way I ended up transitioning to the women's side is I started to get to know their coach, Nick, and one of his staff members ended up moving on sort of abruptly. He then was looking for somebody to come in and be the first assistant. He asked me. I then went in and started coaching for him.
Yeah, that's cool. And even for you, you did touch upon it before, how your wife is originally from here. And Canisius was almost a part of your life before you even knew it, as she was a grad here. And how did the ball start rolling for you to make that adjustment from nearby Buff State and be in the D3 game to then transition here to Canisius?
So the head coach at Canisius at the time, I ended up building a rapport with him through the club game, trying to promote players into his program. He moved his coach on, or something had happened there. I'm not sure exactly what went on. He gave me a call. It was sort of within a 10-month process of being at Buffalo State. Right. It was obviously a tough decision to leave, but a bit of a no-brainer, being ambitious and somebody that wanted to make his way up the ladder. I just came across, and that's how my transition happened. So quite fortunate. I felt like I was in the right place at the right time. The networks and the connections I built allowed me to take on that role.
And that's something that even I'm realizing now in like the journalism industry, is like how important connections are. And I feel like there are a lot of similar parallels in the coaching game as well. And you can see that with that story. But what were the biggest differences once you got here to Canisius that you saw from D3 coaching there at Buff State to then transitioning into Division I? Were there some pretty big outliers, or was it relatively the same?
It's funny, there weren't drastic differences. I think people think Division I athletes, there's this big difference between D2, D3. I always say there's players that are playing Division II and Division III that could play at this level, in my opinion. I think what you see at this level, it's more the psychological, mental side of the game, that they realize they're having to commit more, they're having to buy in more, there's probably less off time, there's a lot more work that goes into it. So the on-field piece is probably similar. I think, there's a difference sometimes in the athleticism, the overall skill level, but the area I saw the biggest difference was the psychological component, just this hunger to really compete at the highest level.
Yeah, and you can tell, like a lot of people say, it is a full-time job. It's a full-time commitment on top of being a student athlete, and it is very impressive stuff. I mean, I always commend and tip my hat to all of our student athletes. But going back to you now being at Canisius, you're here for 2 years, part of some good teams, they're in the thick of things in the MAC. And then now you're finally going to get your chance to become the head coach after, Todd Clark, he resigns. And it was a weird time as well because that was going into COVID as well. So what was that experience like for you to know during one of the craziest times in our lifetimes with everything going on with COVID to then know, okay, I'm getting my first opportunity to be a head coach. How did you navigate that experience?
It was day to day. I mean, like you said, it was the unknown. 1 minute you were training, the other minute you weren't. You didn't know if you were coming or going. We didn't really have answers for long periods of time because no one really knew what was going to come from it. We just stuck to the task. We tried to look after the players. That was our number one priority. You know, when we look at their journey and what was taken away from them, some players lost part of the season, some didn't have an opportunity to play. They were locked up in rooms. They weren't really allowed to socialize. So that was my main focus during that time. Obviously, the hope that we would get to compete was always in the back of my mind, but just making sure their best interest was at the forefront of things was really something we were focused on there.
So then in that first season in 2020, you guys did not have a fall season. It was transitioned then to the spring, and you played minimal games. There were only 6 games there, but that was the time when you were the interim coach. So how formative was that for you to at least get your feet under you and, okay, this is how I want this program to be run, and trying to move that in the right direction, even when you, like, you said, there's so much unknown in the world, but also in your current position, if they were going to bring you back or not as well. Tell me how that experience was, because that's obviously a very stressful time. It had to be.
Yeah, it was, but it was also exciting.
Right.
I just felt fortunate to be in that position, and I was going to give it my all to make sure that, 1, the players got a good experience, but 2, we tried to perform and showcase. There was a lot of adjustments we made as coaches. You know, the style of soccer we tried to tweak a little bit. But again, 1 week you had a player in, the next week she was out, and you just really didn't know what things were going to look like from week to week. So really just trying to bring everybody together and get everybody under the same umbrella.
And then, thankfully, then you get the job. Now you're officially here at Canisius, and you can build the program that you want. And I think there's so much precedent in NCAA athletics of when a new coach comes in and you want to see consistent turnaround. You want to see those results right out of the gate. But I feel like when you first came here, you realized, and you made it very apparent, that this is going to be, a year-by-year thing. It's going to take some time to get where you want to go. And you saw that last year as well. In your first full season there were some times where guys were so close to getting some of those really close wins, but it just wasn't mapped out for you at that time. So during some of those harder times last season, how difficult was it for you to continue to be positive and stay on that track? Because by all means, you could have changed the way you wanted to play and won some of those games. I called the games, I saw them, I knew that. But how important was it for you to keep on brand and keep what you were trying to build here and continue that success?
Yeah, it was difficult, right? Not only for myself, but for the players. Like you said, there were games, I think, if we just made adjustments and played a certain way, you could scrape results. But for me, getting my opportunity, it was important that first year I set a staple in place that this is who we're going to be, this is how we're going to play. And it might take a little bit of time, and there's going to be growing pains, and there's going to be challenging moments. But when I look at where I envision this program in the next 2-3 years, you can already see this year it's taken a leap. Next year, I believe it's going to take another leap. And then by year 4, it should be in a real good place. And that's why we went through those growing pains, because the longevity of the program and the success that we want, you've got to make those tough adjustments. And yeah, it was a challenge for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's just playing that long game, like you said, and building consistency year after year. When did you start to see the shift in maybe the attitude of some of the players for them to buy in? Was that during last season? You talked about in January how everybody kind of got on the same page and was ready to go in the off season and trying to build a consistent winner this year. When did you really see as a coach that the flip was switched and you saw that everybody was all in?
I think, not to discredit the group from last year, I think they tried. We tried last year, right? We gave it our all. It just didn't work out. And I think what starts to happen is when you continue to lose, it can become somewhat of a habit, right? It's like winning. It's a habit. It becomes second nature. So we found ourselves in a little bit of a rut. I think the nice thing come January, we were able to restart, right? We were able to put that behind us, and those 16 players grew drastically from those experiences, whether they knew it or not. We learned, we grew, we saw how close we were, and as long as we were willing to make the little adjustments that needed to be made, you know, we believed that change would happen, and I think we're seeing that now.
Yeah, and you're seeing it large scale with not just those 16 players, but also the newcomers. You have consistent goal scorers, you have multiple that you can rely upon, and you have 2 shutdown goaltenders, and you have that veteran presence of players that have been in the program for a while now and have played a lot of minutes, and you're seeing that growth still. So we'll just focus on this year's team for right now. But what do you think the ceiling is for this year's team as you enter conference play? Because you look at some of those games that you played last year that were winnable games, and you were on the right side of them this year. For Cornell, for example, that was a very winnable game last year, and you did it this year. A very hard-fought match against UB at their house when they're playing their starters the whole game. They have their captains in last year after they built their lead. Maybe they weren't in the game for as long. So tell me, what do you think the ceiling is for this year's squad?
You know, it's such a tough question, right? And I hate to get ahead of myself because I don't want to put that pressure on the group. But what I will say, if we can compete the way we've competed, we're not afraid of anyone in conference. And that's from the so-called top team to the bottom team. I believe if we play to our capability, we'll be the team that people are going to fear.
Yeah, and you can tell that even in that last game against Cleveland State as well. Last year you lost to them 4-2. Close game for some of it. You knock in some goals to make the deficit slim a little bit, but you guys were in the driver's seat for really all of that game. And talk to me about now as a coach, what differences are you seeing when you're on the sidelines and you can see those players without you even having to say anything for them to just go out and do it? Like, that has to be such a rewarding feeling for you that now you're building this team, you're building this program, and then you're seeing the results right in front of you. How great of a feeling is that?
It's unbelievable. It's the feeling we all want as coaches, right? I think the buy-in, the understanding of what we're asking them to do is key. But there's this aura amongst the group. There's this sort of swagger, this confidence that they've got this year. And we're just a tough team. We're really resilient and tough. And, you know, maybe bar the UB game, but even that game, we fought tooth and nail with them till the end and hit the crossbar twice. And, you know, Sean's a good friend of mine over there. And I could see the look on his face. I think we shocked him a little bit. And, you know, maybe bar that game, I feel like we've been the enforcer, we've been the dominant team, and it's something the girls are really proud of, and we're just going to continue to take it into each game. Yeah,
and talking about that, you being now the enforcer in some of these contests, how do you now bottle this competitive stretch up and translate that into conference play? Because we talked a little bit before this, but that's all great and all, and it's awesome having that record so far, but the games that matter are now in conference, and that's really where you can shape your destiny for the team. So how do you guys now combat that success and have it translate into conference play?
I think there's belief now. I think there's belief amongst the players. If you'd asked me this last year and you'd asked a couple of the players, I honestly think we'd go into games thinking we were going to get beat, right? Because like I said, it became a habit. That belief isn't there now. The belief is we're going to go in and win and we can beat anybody. And I think just switching that mindset and going in with that confidence will be a telling tale.
Yeah, and that's funny that you say that. And I don't know if you know this, but the day before you guys played Cleveland State, I saw Tiani, and I asked her, I was like, hey, final score, tell me, what do you think? It's like, we're going to win 1-0. And I said, who's going to score? She's like, I'm going to score. And that's exactly what happened. That's just a small microcosm of the belief from top down in the lineup, from, you know, starters and substitutions. Like, you guys are building something that's very special, and it's great to see, and it makes me happy as an outside perspective. But now as we transition to the end, this is going to be something that I ask every coach now in this series is, pretend that I'm a recruit and you want me to come to Canisius. What is your selling pitch, not just for the school in general, but for this potential player to now come into the program? What would you say to them?
I think there's opportunity here. There's opportunity, there's excitement. it feels like a new program right now. Do you want to be a part of this journey? Do you want to be a part of something special? Come and join us. Help us get to that next stage. Buffalo is a fantastic city. You know, I know every coach says the culture's great amongst the players, but we really do have a great group of young women who are all together. They like each other. They socialize. If you want to get a friendship group for the rest of your life, an amazing city where there's fantastic opportunity to go and work and maybe set your future up here. I honestly believe there's not many better places than Canisius and Buffalo.
Yeah, and you're seeing it right here. You built your roots here, you have your family here, and it's great to see. So that's going to do it for this episode. Again, I'd like to thank Coach Louie for joining me here today. And be on the lookout for more content in the next few weeks, as now we will transition into some of the Canisius alumni as well that have gone through the ranks here in the Canisius athletics program. We'll see you next time. As always, go Griffs.